TFA fam. It is the week 17 waiver wire show, the last one of the year. If you've been rocking with us this whole time, thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. It was another ugly day of football. Seems to have been the case really for the past like 3 or 4 weeks, it feels like. But with that also comes some good things because it means we didn't have a lot of injuries either. So, Kev, let's just jump right into it. Who are you looking to stream at quarterback for week 17?
Well, let's be honest. This is the, for most people, this will be the fantasy championship, unless you're playing for like the toilet bowl or third place, and maybe that's a decent payout, so you're still trying, stuff like that. But for the most part, a lot of people are out of it. So I don't think there's a ton of options here. And believe me, if you're in the fantasy championship, you're probably playing the guys that you had, unless somebody gets hit with COVID, which the way the last 2 weeks have gone, who knows? We could have a whole new round of players on COVID this week. But I think first off, it's Tua Tagovailoa. They have not played yet, 41% rostered. There will be at Tennessee. The Titans allow the 11th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, ranked 15th in pass DVOA. Tua also ranks first in red zone completion percentage, deep ball completion percentage, and he's 8th in pressure completion percentage. So those are all really positive. He's played pretty well this year, despite I don't think he's had a ton of really monster performances, but he's just been really consistent in what he's done. He also has put up top 15 performances in 3 of his last 4 games. So I do think Tua is a very viable option. Tennessee can be had through the air. Miami has not been able to do a whole lot on the ground this year for the most part, I guess, unless your name's Duke Johnson. But for the most part, they really haven't been able to get the running game going. And the Titans are really good against the run. So I think this is a game where you see the Dolphins really air it out. Jalen Waddle is back, Devontae Parker. So they kind of have everybody, Mike Gesicki. So I would say in this game that you would expect the Dolphins to look to throw here. The other one is Carson Wentz. I mean, it's kind of the I don't feel great about it, but 48% rostered versus the Raiders, completed 18 of 28 for 225 and 2 scores and 0 interceptions against the Cardinals on Saturday night. The Raiders currently ranked 25th in pass DVOA and do allow the 11th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So that is definitely a positive there. So Carson Wentz sitting out there and you're kind of desperate at quarterback, or, if we lose somebody through COVID this week, I think Carson Wentz is also a viable option against the Raiders. And the other options, you'd have to be really desperate, but Justin Fields versus the Giants, if he's able to play. He was out this week due to an ankle injury. And then Jimmy G, I don't know if I can trust him whatsoever, but they do get Houston this week. But those are kind of the options for me this week.
Yeah, not great over at running back either. Obviously, if Darrell Williams is available in your leagues, you need to go and pick him up with Clyde Edwards-Helaire suffering that collarbone injury. The X-ray did come back negative, so that is good, but he's still going to get an MRI to determine the severity of the injury. But when I looked on Yahoo, he was already like 60% rostered. So, but if he is sitting out there, you need to go and add him. The other injury we had was Miles Sanders with the hand injury. So Jordan Howard would be the guy that I want to get. Now, it is worth noting that Howard exited in the fourth quarter what was called a stinger. So it doesn't seem to be anything he's going to miss time for. So Jordan Howard is the guy that I would want to get, but also keep an eye on Boston Scott as well. But Howard is going to be the guy here to pay attention to. And he did run, I think, 10 routes to Boston Scott's 5 in this game. So might have a little bit of PPR upside as well. And then the other one, you hate to see it. The other injury that we did have was James Robinson going down with the non-contact Achilles injury, something you just absolutely hate to see. But Dario Ogunbowale was the guy who came in and basically went into a workhorse role. He played 61 snaps, saw 17 opportunities, put up 70 total yards and a score on that. So on volume alone, he could be a solid back end RB2 flex kind of play against New England next week. That is the weakness of that defense. And if he's going to be involved in the passing game, which is kind of what he has been whenever he's not been in a primary role for Jacksonville, he is who I would look to. And then I just want to mention, obviously, Derek Gore here. In deeper leagues, if your 16-team league or something like that. The only thing that I want to caution here is even whenever Clyde missed time earlier this year, Gore was only playing between 15 to 20% of the snaps on most of those weeks. So if you pick him up, don't go into it thinking it's going to be like a 50-50 or even like a 60-40 kind of split here. between the two, but we have seen him produce on limited touches earlier this year. So Daryl Williams, if he's available, is the guy. Jordan Howard next, Dore Ogunbowale, and then Boston Scott is how I would go through the Week 17 waiver as a running back. Kev, what you got at receiver?
Yeah, I think it's a little thin this week, but I mean, I think there are some viable options here. The first two is Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Allen Lazard. MVS should be able to return this week from COVID as long as he can clear. I think he makes for a really viable wide receiver 3. Then you have Allen Lazard. There is no Randall Cobb here in this offense, and so, I think if you look at him this week, I mean, he went 2 receptions, 45 yards on a score, 13.8 fantasy points. He could have had a second touchdown. He dropped what would have been, it was a 9-yard touchdown. Hit him right in the hands. He dropped it. So that could have been even a better day for Allen Lazard. But I think both of them are very, very viable options against Minnesota. Minnesota's been terrible this year. They allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers. And so I do think that both of them are viable options this week. I would prioritize MVS over Allen Lazard, but either way, I think they're both options. Then you have KJ Osborne, 5 receptions on 7 targets for 68 yards and a touchdown, 17.8 fantasy points. We did see Adam Thielen, surprisingly or non-surprisingly, leave that game with what looks to be a re-aggravation of that high ankle sprain that may force him to miss time. So I do think KJ Osborne is somebody that I think I would be looking at, especially in a game that they're going to have to probably throw the ball a ton playing Packers. He had 5 receptions on 7 targets for 68 yards and a score in that game. And then Osborne, like I said, I think he's more of a viable wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 against the Packers. And he's now scored at least 14 fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games, too, without Adam Thielen on the field. So KJ Osborne would be a really strong play. The next 2 you have for me is Manny Sanders. He is only rostered in 50% of Yahoo leagues. They do get Atlanta this week. I also wanted to mention Isaiah McKenzie here, who is only rostered in 0.3% of Yahoo leagues. Manny Sanders, 2 receptions on 20 yards for a touchdown. This was a much tougher matchup against the Patriots, but he did drop what should have been just an easy touchdown, which would have at least made him have a little bit better of a day. But he did drop it other than that. But we with Isaiah McKenzie, 11 receptions on 12 targets, 125 yards and a score. But I think he's going to be very hard to trust. But, Cole Beasley and Gabe Davis are once again going to be out this week because neither one of them are vaccinated. So both of them are going to be out again for next week. So, I think Manny Sanders is, especially against Atlanta. Atlanta's been terrible against opposing wide receivers. And so I do think, Manny makes for kind of a wide receiver 4, where Isaiah McKenzie, I think, is going to be really hard to trust. I would not expect another 12 targets for him today, for him next week. That's something that I would not expect. And I don't know if I would go chasing, this past week's, performance for this week. Next up for me, Byron Pringle, something that I kind of talked about all week. I thought that he was going to be the guy here, and that absolutely was. That was even with Tyreek Hill. But he's only rostered 2%. Now they get Cincinnati this week, and this is probably going to be the highest total on the slate this week against these two offenses. Joe Burrow coming off a day where he threw for 500 yards against the Ravens. But Pringle, 6 receptions on 7 targets for 75 yards and 2 scores. Now that was with Kelsey out due to COVID, and as long as Kelsey's able to return, it's going to be a little bit chasey. But I do think that he is the solidified wide receiver 2 in this offense. So I mean, if you're kind of desperate, if you're missing a bunch of pieces, Byron Pringle does make a little bit of sense as kind of a sneaky wide receiver 4 in a matchup that they're probably looking at where they're going to have to throw the ball a lot against the Cincinnati. This matchup against Cincinnati. Kadarius Toney was able to return today, rostered 22% at least. They do get Chicago next week, which we all know Chicago's pass defense is dreadful. But he had 4 receptions on 9 targets for 28 yards. But again, he's very hard to trust. I mean, both Giants quarterbacks today average 2.7 yards per attempt. That is about as bad as you can get. But with his high target share that we continue to see every time he actually plays, I think this is more of a volume-based and PPR formats. But the Bears do allow the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. And then some of the other ones, Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's seen 21 targets over his last 3 games, but he's going to be really hard to trust with Baker at quarterback. They do have a great matchup against the Steelers, but it's just really hard to trust Donovan Peoples-Jones. He is seeing the targets, but just not really getting the results right now. As that with that offense and Baker Mayfield just looking, like Baker Mayfield, I guess. The next one is Marvin Jones, rostered in 51% of leagues, 8 receptions on 74 yards and on 13 targets. This is not a great matchup against the Patriots. Patriots allow the 4th fewest fantasy points, but he's out there. He's seeing targets. Again, if you're kind of desperate, I don't necessarily hate it. The other one would be Josh Palmer. I forgot to add him to this list, but Josh Palmer, Mike Williams is going to remain on the COVID list for week 17, so he will be out for this next week. So we're kind of looking at the same situation here for them. So Josh Palmer is also a guy that I think that we could take a look at as a pretty viable option, with Mike Williams also being out for next week.
To wrap things up with tight end, it is ugly, it is gross out there. 3 guys here to mention. First, I'm going to talk about Gerald Everett. Now, he's a little boom bust. His production fantasy points have been a little bit all over the place the past couple of weeks. Produced well today. Next week gets a matchup against Detroit, who has given up the 10th most half PPR points per game to tight ends. The other thing to worry about here, along with Everett kind of being up and down, is the matchup, and the game script might not be in his favor. With, we would assume that Seattle would be able to handle this game pretty easily, but Seattle's been kind of a disappointment, and Detroit's been hanging in with a lot of teams. So that is one option. The other one that I like is Cole Kmet going up against the Giants. He hasn't seen fewer than 5 targets since week 11, and over his last 5 games, he has at least 40 yards in all of those as well. And then, Kev, you were talking about the Cincy KC matchup. That point total is at 49, so CJ Uzomah makes a little bit of sense here. Again, another boom bust option, but KC has given up the 12th most half PPR points per game to tight end, so he's worth a look there in what should be, like you were saying, the highest total on the week. So those are going to be the 3 tight end options that we have. And then at defense, it is pretty gross out there for defense this week. On Yahoo's roster percentages anyway, the only team that was sitting around that 50% roster total that we typically look for whenever we're suggesting these plays to you guys was Seattle. Again, going up against that matchup with Detroit, they are at home. So other than that, there were not a lot of options for these teams to stream at defense this week that were widely available. So any questions you have, drop them here in the comments of the YouTube, or join the Discord if any of these other teams are available. Hopefully you already have a team that you can rock with at defense. But yeah, that's really it. It's a gross week at defense. So hopefully you picked up some of the streamers that we had been talking about for the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, I do like CJ Uzomah, and he did see, I think, 7 targets today as well, which is Joe Burrow out here just balling, just 520 yards on their head.
Yeah.
It's just even better because they asked him after the game about I guess some of the Ravens said that we're not giving him the gold jacket yet or something like that, blah blah blah. And so they asked him about it after the game if he had heard that. It was just like really like kind of snide remark, like, yeah, I heard it. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess what it was they had asked if they were planning on double or triple teaming Chase since he went off for 200 yards against them the last game. And they're like, well, he's not Devontae Adams. We're not going to give him that kind of treatment. We're not. Then he said about, also playing with Hall of Famer Aaron Rodgers, and we're not giving that gold jacket to him just yet. And that's where that came from.
Not smart. Not smart.
The Bears next week. Who do the Bears play? The Bears get the Giants, and who do the Cowboys play?
The Cowboys. Or the Cardinals. It's tough with the Cowboys because what is it? They like 7 or 8 straight games now that they've had a defensive score. It's not something I'm going to count on, but keep waiting for that streak to end. But they just keep doing it. Very opportunistic defense, but I would probably go with the Bears before I went with the Cowboys, and just because Arizona, they could definitely put up some points, and so the Cowboys defense has been really good. I will say that for sure this year. But another thing, I was like, like targeting like defenses like the Lions and stuff like that hasn't really worked out. Even today, it really
Yeah.
wasn't a great option with Tim Boyle, right? I will say this: Dan Campbell has done a hell of a job coaching that team this
Yeah.
year. I mean, they have been in every single game they've had. They have nobody on their roster. I mean, I don't outside of. I mean, they've even had DeAndre Swift for the last 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, and they continue to play well. So that is one of those situations like that, and really Houston. Both of those teams really deserve some credit for being able to really knock off some good teams, being able to stay in most games. Like most of these games, like every week we're like, oh, we're going to target the Texans. Oh, I want the defense playing the Lions. Hasn't really worked out this year doing that. Like it just hasn't. Like they've done a pretty good job of keeping up. So, but I will say this is our last waiver ad. Last waiver ad show of the season. I hope everybody is able to get some dubs and get some championships. I see a lot of people here saying that they're heading on to the championship.
Yep.
That is good to hear. If not, hey, go jump in and play some DFS. It's a good time, especially NFL playoffs. The actual NFL playoffs DFS is the absolute GOAT. It's the best. It is the absolute best DFS there is. So, if you're out of it, don't give up. You still got some other stuff we can do. Plus, we have the NFL Playoff Challenge we'll be doing, which is absolutely free as well. We'll be putting out more information on that over in the Discord. So, Cody.
Yep. So make sure that you are in the Discord. You can find that link in any of our videos. We'll drop it in here as well after the show. You can find the video description. So join that. Hit us with a sub. Hit us with a like while you are here as well. We have more content coming for you after the season is over. The DFS is going to keep rolling, and then the Dynasty stuff is really going to start to pop off at that time. So don't go anywhere. Keep it here. Good luck this week. Hopefully we see you in the ships in week 17, and we'll talk to you all soon.